Hi, I'm back again, and I'm so glad you're here with me. And we are going on in James. We are starting chapter 4, and today we're going to do chapter 4, verses 1, 2, and 3. Just 3 verses, but there is so much packed into this, and I hope I can do it justice. And so I'm going to start by reading those verses to you. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this? That your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. That's just packed with so much. And I don't know if I can do it justice, but maybe I can get you started so that it will help you and sort of perk up some ideas to look into as you study this. Okay, so this is about warring against worldliness and Amazon or the internet or even Facebook with its ads and stuff. Very, very tempting. And they seem to know what you've looked at, even not even that you've bought or even what you've bought, and can tempt you by showing you ads that are those ads for that particular item or similar ones. So keep that in your mind as we go through this. And it mentions in verse 2, chapter 4, verse 2, about murdering. Now, you probably haven't murdered anybody, otherwise, you'd be in jail and probably not getting this course. And so I'd like to submit to you that murdering can mean other things. Remember, we talked about gossip and how malicious it can be? Gossip can be like a form of murdering. And sometimes the things we do because we want to get something can cause us to do things that are wrong or say things that are wrong to our husband or the other people, whoever they are in your life. So, James, in the previous chapters that we've been studying, he's talked about opposites. Okay, so right now we're talking about um, the quarreling and the strife that you can have with yourself, between yourself and somebody else. Okay, so he's talking about opposites in that he was talking about disorderly conduct and peacemaking. That's two opposites. You can have the wrong kind of conduct or behavior, and then you can have peacemaking. They are at opposite extremes. And so if you want to review that, go back to James 3, 14 through 16, and you can even review by going back and seeing what I said in other videos. Or the peacemaking you'll find in James 3, 14 through 16. So now he turns again to write about strife and contention. And these are actions that sometimes are in our church and we don't want to have them there, but they are. Or sometimes they're between, um, like homeschoolers. Sometimes you'll see them in whatever group you are in on Facebook. I've seen that where one or two people start stirring up trouble. So you'll see these things wherever you go. Maybe you've had a friend who turned out not to be the kind of friend you thought that she was, and there was strife, and she stirred up through her actions things. And those actions come from things that we have in our hearts. So we're not going to talk about how it's somebody else that might be doing those things. I want you to think and me to think of about how I play into this, because it never helps me if I overlook um, how I might be doing these things. If I read the Bible and think, oh yeah, Susie does that, or oh yeah, my husband does that. And we don't want to do that. We want to look at it and say, oh, Lord, change me. How can I respond in a more godly way to this situation, even if you think the other person's doing you wrong. Sometimes you might be blinded to that, and you might be the one doing something wrong. And what I've always told myself is that I am wrong once I open up my mouth and start responding in the wrong way. So the whole thing is that we don't have something, okay? So the verse starts off, what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? It, James is asking a question. So I'm asking you, what causes the fights and the quarrels in your life? And is it not this, he says? Is it your passions that are at war in you? So it's not the situation. It's not quite like we think it is. It's not that I say that it's apples and my husband says, no, it's oranges, or I want apples and he says, no, I want oranges. It's not that. What James is saying, look inside, is the conflict you're having inside your heart and inside your life in the first place. Okay, so just think about that. And so that the conflict we have ends up causing a quarrel or a fight because of what's there on the inside in the first place. And it's something we can't get. For some reason, we can't get apples. Maybe they don't have them at the supermarket. And I want apples so bad, so that I'm going to fight for them. Maybe I want the apple my husband has, the very last apple. And so I start quarreling with him over the apple. And what happens is that what James is pointing out is that we end up fighting because we are so passionate about having the wrong thing, and we end up doing actions that are greater than the thing we don't want, that we want. So that you might want an apple very badly, the one that your husband is holding, and so that you end up doing mean things. And it can lead to murder, is what he's saying. And what I think he's saying is that it can lead to a murder, like a person murdering the person's, like, their reputation or the relationship you have with them. And so that my tongue, remember the verses on the tongue, can end up saying, we can end up murdering with our tongue. We can go to a girlfriend and gossip and murder our husband, so to speak, by the bad things we're saying about him. I'm just giving husband as an example, okay? You start wanting her to agree with you that, say, your husband or your friend is doing the wrong thing when maybe you are. And because you're friends, she'll tend to agree with you because you might present a very good argument and case for that apple that you want. So it all happens because of discontent. We end up fighting and arguing and quarreling, and it all starts with the discontent, something that we want and can't have. Um, and we lust because we don't ask. Maybe we should have prayed and asked the Lord for it. And because we didn't ask, um, then when you might at some point want to ask, your motives are wrong, your attitude is wrong, and God doesn't give it to you because you are wrong in the whole way you're going about it. And so many things aren't wrong to have, but when we merely want it for our pleasure, that's where something is wrong about it. We're not wanting it because it will in some way help us to reach other people for Christ, or because it will help us do something good for our children. Um, and that apple, we maybe we want that apple because we wanted to share that apple with our children. And so that a lot of times we wanted something just for our own pleasure, for our own self. And it comes from a selfishness, a discontent that is in our heart in the first place. And you can think of a situation that is bigger than an apple, and it may start off small. A lot of times these things are very small in the first place, and then they blow out of proportion. So you can end up wanting something so badly that you end up causing fights and quarreling with, and your spirit is so discontent and out of whack. Okay, I'm going to give you a few verses I'm going to read them to you that will help you with this. So in James 1:14, which we already did, um, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Now I'm going to help you think of Amazon or wherever it is you shop online, because you can be right in your own home. It used to be, in order to be lured and tempted with worldly things, you had to go out of your home and go shopping. Yes, there were some mail order catalogs, and so you could have things coming to your home. But now it is so easy because you can be on the internet and even go to Amazon to get something that you need, and something that you want pops up there. Or you see things that you didn't know you wanted that are things that other people bought when they bought this, or um, things that are trending that people are buying. Just fill it all in. So you're tempted when you are lured and enticed by his own desire. And Satan and Amazon, is Amazon like Satan? But Satan uses things like that to lure and entice and tempt you. So just keep that in mind when you shop, because um, we can, where we used to have to pray for things that we wanted, we don't have to do, well, you do, but you don't have to do it anymore. All you have to do is just go to Amazon or go to wherever, and you can have what you want before you actually have the money for it. And you can wind up escalating debt in your life. Okay, so 1 John 2:15 through 16 says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." The things that you have in your home, your furniture and your dishes and whatever it is that you enjoy, the pictures on your wall, these are all temporal things. Even some things that we do are temporal because they're the kind of things that we're only going to be doing in this life. And it's a good thing to keep in mind when you want something and you're lured and tempted to think about how this is something I want, but I won't need it later. And that's why I really like the minimalist mindset. And I am not a minimalist exactly, but I try to keep that in mind, and to, when I'm done with something, to let it go and give it to Goodwill or somebody else, and not think I have to hang on to it. I think about how this is just temporal. I don't need this anymore. Okay, so we're going to talk about what murder is. And again, I think I touched on it. Murder is the craving for pleasure and the inability to achieve it, which drives men and women to shameful deeds, even to murder and murderous hatred and attitudes. So you see how murder starts in the heart. So even if you have never murdered someone and never ever would do that, we all should examine our heart and think of, do we think of somebody with such hatred or dislike because they are just so difficult in some way, and maybe rightfully so, but we are supposed to love our neighbor, and um, that we don't want to be driven to shameful deeds, even shameful words, because words can cut through and murder someone, because you can say things that are so hurtful that it hurts a person for the rest of their lives, because words are a strange thing. And if you've received words into your heart that are very hurtful, it's some it's interesting how years and years and years later you can remember who said it, what they said, and you can somewhat remember the feeling that you had because of it. And so be careful that you aren't the one that's sending out those words that are murderous words that will hurt somebody that badly. And in Matthew 5:21 through 22, it says, "You have heard said that it was to those of old, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire." That's serious. We are not to call somebody a fool, and we're not to call them some similar word that has a similar result in their lives, because it's like murder. That's what it says in this verse. It's Matthew 5:21 through 22. And the real trouble is not somebody else, and it's not whether or not we never ever murder or think we didn't do this. It's ourselves, thoughts that we have that have the potential of action in our heart, and that we don't allow God to cleanse through Jesus' blood, so that we stop them from happening and turning into actions ever. And some of you may have been a wife or a mom who has been the receiver on the receiving end of murderous words. And I just want to encourage you that focus on Jesus. When those things happen, it can be so hard to move on, and it can stir up anger in your heart towards that person, and in retaliation. Those things are natural, they're human, but Jesus offers us his Holy Spirit to live in and through you, so that you can respond. It has to do with your conduct, how you respond with them. It's not saying that every husband is perfect, because they're not. You are to love them back, and that can be so hard. As servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. So servants could be wives. Mothers sometimes receive these kind of words from their children. For this is the gracious thing: when mindful of God, one endures sorrow while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if, when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? Like, it's no credit if you've done something wrong and you endure. But if, when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example, so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in the body of the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his words you have been healed, for you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your soul. I went to that verse over and over again. They're parts of my marriage, and I'll tell you something. You do that for years, and you'll be surprised what happens in your marriage. Marriage isn't easy. And James, I think, is a wonderful book to encourage us to do the right thing as women and as wives, mothers, whatever, and just to live our lives for Jesus. And life is not easy. Your husband isn't perfect, just as you are. And I can't say that it was just me. I mean, just him. It was just me too. So I'll see you tomorrow.